I'm Callie.
I'm Lauren.
And welcome to the Book Common Room podcast. We need to do a different instrument. Welcome back to our spoiler-filled episode. We had so much fun talking about Miss Austen last time and who she was, her life, and then just some possible critics, why she was popular. But we want to take a deep dive into why we love her and why we love this story. So, Lauren, do you want to start off with our reviews of why you...
You want me to start?
Yeah,
okay.
Why don't you start?
Okay.
I want to listen to you.
I see you. Your thoughts were way more, like, I feel like you can be a lot more eloquent. I feel like talking for me is very spontaneous and not as eloquent. I usually have to, like, write out a lot of things, but I kind of just have a bullet point of my like, overall reaction of the book, and then also parts I feel like we need to talk about.
Okay. I'm down.
My gosh. And I'm going to read some parts too. Because
I'm excited.
I'm just like, how else can you talk about this other than like reading it? Because she does so well. So
I'm down. I'm ready.
Okay, you guys, I love Persuasion. Surprise! Did you know? Yeah. Okay, so, and I mentioned this in our last episode. I have read Persuasion before. I read it for a class. It was interesting because it was, of course, like in an academic setting. So they kind of have like reading it through different lenses, like a feminist lens or historical lens, and you also get like the conversation of nature or disinterestedness and things like that. But second time reading it was really good because first off, like I was accustomed to Jane Austen's language. It wasn't like a barrier when I first was reading it, so I got a lot more out of it. Like I actually was like, oh, okay, so this is who this person is.
Yeah.
Which goes to show, like, it's not a major thing if you can't keep track of everybody.
Yeah.
It's more of just, like, plot points. So, anyways, I really loved reading it. I had a lot of fun reading it outside of a classroom. And, like, I understood the language better. And I just got so much of the humor. Like, I was like, man, her humor is such a central part of her writing. Like, her characters just all felt so real to me. And I know that she does go into this like info dump at the beginning and like spends a lot of time explaining, I feel like, the settings throughout the book. I always felt like this was important to show, at least for me, the monotonous world of the gentry. Also, and like social climbing. But also something that I really liked reading Persuasion was like that nature, when you're like out in nature, like you're more yourself kind of a thing. And they like make that note for like Anne, like they're constantly like, she's past her bloom, or her youth is gone, and that's all like
She's 27.
She's 27, but it's because of like having lost love. I think when she was young, making her more sad. Honestly, I think the bloom thing is the fact that she's sad.
Yeah.
And then, like, as soon as she goes to Lyme, her, like, she's fuller. She becomes fuller, like, being outside, being at the sea. And they always make, like, this comment, like, that this guy was, like, sick and he, like, goes to the sea and he's, like, better. And, like, I know that there is, like, actual, like, lower elevation and things like that, but there's just this renewal when she's outside and when she's in nature.
Touch grass, guys.
Touch grass. Yeah, go outside. No, literally. Like, go outside, take a walk. But it's just interesting because she, like, feels like herself more. And she's happier, which I thought was really interesting. So I loved that aspect. I just have, like, so many quotes that I just want to share that I feel like from this time reading were important for me as a reader because I was like, dang, like, we need to talk about this. So if we feel like we can go into that.
Go for it.
Because I also am like, I want Callie to be able to jump in and say what she liked because
I'll jump in.
I don't know, like, I'm very curious.
Yeah.
Jane Austen grapples with this quite a lot, but she speaks on like women and like love a lot in these books, clearly, because it's like romance. But an essential part of Persuasion, and hence the title, because it's usually these characters are grappling with this aspect in their characters. Pride and Prejudice, Sense and Sensibility, and you got Persuasion. And this whole book, Persuasion is being persuaded or easily persuaded into things is kind of looked at as like a bad thing. Anne thinks these through, so it's not like she's just a yes person, but she takes into account her people in her lives that she trusts and loves. And so the whole premise of this is like, she turned down this person she knew and regretted because she loved them, but mainly because she was advised not to marry them. And she comes to the conclusion where she was like, I don't regret listening to them, but I do like understand that I could have been happy.
Yeah.
Probably would have worked out. But there's like this moment like in the book when Wentworth is talking to Louisa, and it's talking about how firmness in character is a virtue. But then you fast forward to after Lyme, and Louisa like freaking knocked herself out.
I felt so bad. They're like, she's dead.
She's dead. She's lifeless. And like and the thing is too, like she was like, there was no blood, there's no bruise, there's like nothing. They just knew that she probably hit her head.
Yeah.
And Anne was like the only calm one. They were all like, one was like, we need a doctor. And everyone was like, oh my gosh, she's dead. And everyone's in shock. And Anna's like, well, have the local go get a doctor.
Yeah.
And have you and Charles carry her. We'll find a good place to put her.
And her sister on the sidelines just like freaking
out. And like then Henrietta, who's Louisa's sister, is like, my sister's dead.
Yeah.
So she's like on her knees, like having issues. So Anne has like this like quick action, and she's able to stay calm.
Yeah.
And like literally everyone is like, man, we need Anne, because like Anne was able to like figure it all out. Anyways, so she gets to this part in kind of after this all happened, and it's her thoughts as Mary decided she wanted to stay, made a whole big fit about Anne staying. Yep. And so Anne is leaving with Wentworth and Henrietta to go tell Louisa's parents to be like, hey, your daughter is at Lyme and she's unconscious. So it's kind of like that's the context. And Anne makes this thought on page 97 of the Oxford Classics, which is chapter 12 of volume 1, if you have the volume separation. It says that Anne wondered whether it ever occurred to him now to question the justness of his own previous opinion as to the universal felicity and advantage of firmness of character, and whether it might not strike him that, like all other qualities of the mind, it should have its proportions and limits. She thought it could scarcely escape him to feel that a persuadable temper might sometimes be as much in favor of happiness as a very resolute character. And I think she's talking about this in the context of like, it was probably better that Anne left. Or it was like, or the fact that he was able to, like, he has to go in and talk to the parents, who probably will be super angry. The fact that their daughter was like hurt while they were all supposed to be kind of like taking care of her. So like there's this moment where I'm just like, I love that, because Anne is like, no, like it's okay to be persuaded. It's also good to have a firm mind, but you shouldn't be absolute in either one of those things in character. And I was like, dang girl, like that's great. So I loved that aspect, because it kind of was like her standing up for herself in a way, and like why she felt like she shouldn't have to regret what everyone else probably might see as like her regretting, or like a flaw in her being persuaded. Because it was the same with Charles. Like she didn't marry Charles Musgrove because Lady Russell's like, maybe that's not a good choice. But she also was like, I didn't love him. So she could make her own mind, but everyone was assuming that someone else was forming her own mind.
I kind of like the aspect where you almost see this, she's mature kind of when we come into the story.
Yeah.
Where before, when she was persuaded not to marry Captain
Wentworth.
At first she might not have been mature enough to stand up and say, no, I do love him, I want to marry him. She was easily persuaded to not. But now, like years later, she has the maturity to realize, be persuaded, but also be able to think for herself. Like, okay, this is this person's opinion, this is this person's opinion. I'm mature enough to know what's right for me.
Yes!
So I liked that whole character development, and just how she needed to be older before she got married.
Yeah.
She needed to go through life a little bit more.
I also just like how, like, even though, like, Lady Russell is clearly a flawed character.
Yeah.
She still respects her. And she also, like, lost her mom. So, like, Lady Russell was really the only one that felt like a real advocate and friend to her. And I think it's important that we listen to our friends and our family. Because, like, sometimes we need that counsel. And I think it's good to be able to have the virtue of being able to listen and like Callie said, be able to know like, yeah, I think you're right. So that was a huge thing in the book that I was like, well, that was like a good moment where it was like persuasion isn't a bad thing.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that this is like also a theme that I feel like goes throughout Jane Austen's books, but it's this idea that women are fickle. Mm-hmm. And I think of that like Shakespeare, like frailty, that name is woman, you know? And I feel like Jane Austen kind of like subtly like responds to that in her writing. And I'm speaking particularly of at the end. So if we're okay with like jump, because I feel like there's a lot of good things, but I really feel like the book sets up for this culminating moment. And it's like this conversation between Captain Harville and Anne. And this is all after the fact that Anne found out that, like, Anne knows that Louisa is happily married with Captain Baywick. Captain
After
B.
she was like, oh, does she love Wentworth?
Yeah.
kind of jealous.
And so they're just like, so she was like, oh, like, it didn't end up being Captain Wentworth. And she also has, like, noticed, she's very perceptive.
Yes.
She, like, watches people's faces. She's very observant, mainly because nobody cares what she says, even though she says, like, good things. But her family never cares. And I feel like that's...
Middle child syndrome.
Literally. Oh my gosh. But I feel like she's very perceptive, and she knew that Wentworth wasn't like necessarily sad about it. Yeah. So that's the context of this conversation. And like, as we get into it, and Captain Harville is kind of, cause they're like, well, was this love? Cause like, was it just that they were in a traumatic situation together and he was
trauma bond?
Yeah. Was it just like, cause they're so different. Like he's this depressed, getting over his fiance being killed, or like died. She didn't killed. She got sick and died. Yeah. Being dead and coming back and not being able to marry his true love, and then falling in love with Louisa, who isn't of like poetry and well-read and
she thought it was a good idea to fall off a wall.
Yeah, she thought, let's have Captain Wentworth catch me as I jump off. And they were all like, no, that's too high. And she was like, boom. And then anyways, she's crazy. But so anyways, so then it was like him caring for her, and they're like, well, what does this say about love? And so Captain Harville, he kind of like, they're kind of having this argument. Very, very like, I don't know how, what's the term? Like, they're not angry. Like, they're just friends, and they're just having this argument as a man who's speaking of love and as a woman who speaks of love. Yeah. And he goes, as I was saying, we shall never agree, but let me observe that all histories are against you. All stories, prose and verse. If I had such a memory, Benwick. As Benwick, I could bring you 50 quotations in a moment on my side of the argument, meaning like he's very well read and reads poetry, and so like if he had Benwick's mind, he would have all these literary quotes. When he goes, and I do not think I ever opened a book in my life which had not something to say upon woman's inconstancy. Songs and proverbs all talk of woman's fickleness, but perhaps you will say these were all written by men. Yes, she is. She goes, perhaps I shall. And this is Anne.
Perhaps I shall.
She's like, yes, if you please, no reference to examples in books. Men have had every advantage of us in telling their own story. Education has been theirs in so much higher degree. The pen has been in their hands. I will not allow books to prove anything. And I loved that, because she's like, even if you pulled quotes, I wouldn't have really counted on them, because they're speaking from their perspective, and they're not a woman. I can't tell. And so like, if they're saying woman is fickle, I need the opportunity to speak, but I don't. And so she goes in, instead of using literature, and she just like, she just lays it out so very well. So basically she says, I know that we'll never prove anything, and we may never agree. And we can't really like do it satisfactory, basically, because like you're always going to be in defense of whoever like you side with. Clearly she's a woman. She's going to support women. He's a man, and he's speaking from a man's experience of love. So she goes, we each begin probably with a little bias towards our own sex, and upon that bias build every circumstance in favor of it which has occurred within our own circle, many of which circumstances may be precisely such as cannot be brought forward without betraying a confidence, or in some respects saying what should not be said. But she goes, I hope I do justice to all that is felt by men or she says you to Captain Harville, and by those who resemble you. God forbid that I should undervalue the warm and faithful feelings of any of my fellow creatures. And she's saying this after Captain Harville is like, he says the most beautiful stuff. He's like, there is not a feeling in the world that I can tell you when I leave at sea to say goodbye to my wife and children. Like, I may never see them again. And he talks about that. And he's like, and the glow I feel when I see my wife's face and my children. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's so tender. So that's what he's saying of like you will never understand that feeling of like never being able to see them again and then getting to see them. And she goes like, yeah, I don't want to undervalue that. And she was like, that's warm and faithful feelings of any of my fellow creatures I don't want to undermine. I should deserve utter contempt if I dared to suppose that true attachment and constancy were known only by women. No, I believe you capable of everything great and good in your married lives. I believe you equal to every important exertion and to every domestic forbearance, so long as, if I may be allowed the expression, so long as you have an object. I mean, while the woman you love lives and lives for you, all the privilege I claim for my own sex, it is not a very enviable one, you need not covet it, is that of loving longest when existence or when hope is gone.
Dang, girl.
Yes! So, like, Anne is like...
The mic drop.
Yeah, and the thing is, and then Captain Harville is like, I can see what you're saying, because Captain Benwick had been 7 months since he lost his fiancée, and he was like, I'm in love! with
Have you not seen those videos where they have a couple... They go into different rooms and they ask the couple like the same question just to see how they answer. And one of them is always, if something were to tragically happen to your spouse, how long would you wait before you start dating someone else? And the woman is always like, oh, years. I don't know how many, but it'd be years. And the average answer the man gives is between 7 and 9 months.
That's insane.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So it's like, it's crazy because I really do think that is such a like a thing we do, and I'm not saying that men aren't like capable of doing that clearly, but in this book that is something that you notice. Like, he had 7 months and then he was like ready to be with Louisa and ready to be with someone, and he was happy again. But Anne has been in love with a man for 8 years and doesn't even know if it will happen. So she might not even ever marry.
Well, and she was the one too that said no to him.
Yeah.
So she's like, well, how would he, like, why would he ever come back to me if I was the one that rejected him?
Yeah. And so she honestly, like, she knows that he's been very hurt by her.
Yeah.
And so this is like her like pouring her heart out and saying like, we love longest. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, because like they need you to exist, and if that exists and the hope is gone, the love is like non-existent, or not even like, I don't know, like you're gonna look for the next love, whereas they like will continue to love.
I almost wonder if like what she's getting at is a lot of times husbands or men are in love with the idea of just loving somebody.
Yeah. And
women are attached to the person, and because of that, then they form love.
Totally.
Like if it's just different.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I'm totally with that, because, and I've like had these conversations with Grayson before, because I'm like, dude, you're gone. Like, he will make this joke about like going into like, he's gonna die in battle or something like that. Like some heroic way. He's like, he doesn't want to, I don't know. Like, he just wants to go out protecting his family, his country, or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's so noble, but you know I'm going with you. And he's like, that's so dumb because you have to like stay and hold the fort. And I was like, no way. Like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I have to go with you. And like any thought of him dying, I'm like, I have no interest in life without you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm not saying that he doesn't, but I'm so passionate about that that I'm just like, I don't know. Like, I don't know.
It's like, what are you gonna do to leave me behind?
Yeah. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. Also, I can pull up facts and sources. Like, medieval times, a lot of them brought their family with them.
True.
And like, so I'm like, I don't know what y'all talking about. But anyways, then like after this whole conversation, Wentworth overheard this.
Yep.
He was like, it literally allowed him to hope, because he clearly has been in love with Anne, which comes to light at Lyme. Because Lyme, he's like jealous of Elliot from the get-go.
Yep.
He's like, who's this guy checking out Anne? I know Anne is beautiful. I know Anne is great. Who is this guy? And like, that's the reason he has literally not said anything is because he thinks Elliot, which I think Elliot did. I think Mr. Elliot did like Anne.
Yeah.
But he liked his position better.
I think he viewed her as a way to get the position and to keep the land he's going to inherit, and loved that. And she was just the vessel for it. I don't know if he loved her as a person.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because she just embodied that. So that's why he liked her.
I liked, like, because some moments, like, she's like, he was genuine. He liked listening to her and cared about what she said.
Yeah.
But I do think he was like, he liked Anne, but he was like, I don't want your dad to have an heir because I'm the heir. So I'm sorry, I'm taking this girl out of the picture.
Yeah, and that's true.
I think there was some of that, but Anne was like a possibility for like potentially having love and being able to love her as a person less. But I think he just liked his station and money and comfortability. Yeah, more than that. Yeah. But there's just like so much. Like she has 2 moments. This is like my last thing we can get in Callie sauce. But there's just like this very good way of like kind of tying the characters together. And like there's a section where I'm like, it's her development of over the course of the whole book, and then his development whole course of like the 8 years they've known each other, and like from the heartbreak to now, and finally like being able to be together. Because he writes that whole letter. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And I would read that.
There's also always a letter in Jane Austen's books. There's some letter where the man writes to confess his love.
Yeah. I mean, like, so in Pride and Prejudice, it was letter to be like, hey girl, don't hate on me for all these reasons. Yeah. But then like this one, it was like, I think Wentworth was like so nervous. Yeah. Like true. I think he was just like, you allowed me to hope. It was like what it was kind of like Pride and Prejudice, where it was like when Lady Catherine shows up
like the middle of the night
hood, and she's like, are you engaged? And she's like, girl, this is the first I'm hearing of this. And she's like, we'll never do it. And she was like, I'm not going to tell you that. And then because she said that to Darcy. And Darcy was like, what? She said, what? Let me go check on her. So it's kind of like that. But Darcy actually went. And whereas Wentworth like left the letter and like, then they like met up. Anyways, I liked it because it was kind of like she's chasing him instead of him chasing her. Yeah. I kind of liked that. But essentially they get to this conversation and she's like thinking over the past and trying to like impartially judge. That is Anne's strongest characteristic. She's able to like distance herself and like look at things as impartially as she can. And she knows that she can't do it perfectly. But I think that's something I want to be better at, because I'm like, dang, Anne is so good at that. Like, I'm very emotional, very defensive. She's able to be like, no, like, I can see why you did this. Yeah. But anyways, so she basically is like, I'm trying to impartially judge, especially with regards to myself, because I think she's pretty, like, beat herself up over her decisions in the past. And she goes, I'm not saying that, I'm not saying that Lady Russell did not err in her advice. It was perhaps one of those cases in which advice is good or bad only as the event decides. And for myself, I certainly never should, in any circumstance of tolerable similarity, give such advice. But I mean that I was right in submitting to her, and that if I had done otherwise, I should have suffered more in continuing the engagement than I did even in giving it up, because I should have suffered in my conscience. I have now, as far as such a sentiment is allowable in human nature, nothing to reproach myself with. And if I mistake not, a strong sense of duty is no bad part of a woman's portion. And she's talking about the duty to your conscience, and I think at the time, she couldn't, marry him knowing that it could potentially hurt her family. And also, she did not know him for very long. Yeah. It was like wow, we're in love. That was it. And she was like, you know what? Like, she knew that if she had gone along with it, she wouldn't feel good about it. And and she was like, I believe I did right. Yeah.
Well, and at the time, too, he didn't really have much of a status, right? No. So, I mean, that's why Miss Russell persuaded her not to be with him. But also, like, who knows if he would have joined the army and like gained his status and his security in life if they did get married. Who's to say that would have happened?
Yep, exactly. And so like this is where Wentworth realized, he's like, so if I came back, because he comes back wealthy with his own ship, and like he's still in the Navy, but he's like, wait, so you're telling me that if I returned here in the year 8 with like, if I had just asked you when I got back, you would have married me? And she's like, yeah. And I literally wrote, y'all could have sped that up. And literally, like, it's so good. But it's like, his growth is basically like saying, I've been thinking over the past, and a question has suggested itself whether there may not have been one person more my enemy, even that the lady. And he's like, my own self. He's like, I've been putting the blame that I've been really feeling from like my own response, like to the whole situation, than to Lady Russell, who I've been blaming, and Anne. And he was like, it was myself that I should have been blaming. And then he was like, anyways, she was just like, yeah, I would have married you if you just came back and asked me. But he still seemed resentful. Anyway, so it was so good. And I thought it ended so well. And man, y'all, Captain Wentworth's letter though, like you read that and it's like literally the most tender thing ever. Like I can no listen longer in silence. I must speak to you by such means that are within my reach. You pierce my soul. I'm half agony, half hope.
Who wouldn't fall in love after reading that letter?
Literally. He's like,
even if Anne was on the fence whether or not she still loved him.
Yep.
That would have like
sent it over.
Yeah.
Girl, what do you mean you don't write romance? Like, you wrote that? And I'm like, okay, I get the humor. Like the humor really is like subtly there constantly. Like it's not even like, it doesn't even ask for attention. You just read it and you're like, that's like their response, that's their character, or like, and whatever. But you read that and I'm like, whew, like that is great. Like, I wish I got a, like, one day I'm gonna be like, Grayson, can you write me a letter like this? Like, please. What was it like? But it's just so like tender. And at the end of the whole story, she's just like so happy to be a sailor's wife. Like she's just so happy to be Captain Wentworth's person. And she's just like, I was full of like tenderness. And I'm just like, oh, that's so cute. Anyways, so I freaking love this book. I need to read more of her other books, but like her growth and her characters are incredible. And I just am like, man, I wish I was as self-aware as her characters are. I'm like, man, if I ever like could like have a breakthrough like thoroughly, I feel like I would be such a better person. Because like they're so good at being, no, I don't regret this, like, and I shouldn't. But I also realize like that I needed this time to grow. Yeah. Or like, and I'm like, there really isn't room in life to have regrets, I feel like, because we're always just learning. And so in the end, like they both had to grow to be able to meet as the people they were. And like, I think she like comments on like what that meant, because it like made them stronger. Yeah, it's so good. Like, oh, she was like, we were more tender, more tried, more fixed in a knowledge of each other's character, truth, and attachment. And I'm like, that's so true. Like, if they didn't have all of that, I don't think they would have, like they needed to be these people to meet at this time. But I don't know. So good. Loved it. Made me cry. So good.
They're like the end of the romance kind of reminds me of, I always relate everything back to Little Woman, but, but Lori and Amy's love Greta Gerwig's adaptation version of it. That whole scene where Amy's like, what's wrong with me wanting to marry rich? Like, what is wrong with that? Everything that I own is going to become my husband's anyway, so why not have the security in that? Yep. And Lori's like, I don't know if the poets would agree with that. She's like, I'm not a poet. I'm just a woman. Yeah. Like, that's so good. But then how eventually they do come together and they get married. But there is also that, like, Lori had to get over Joe, and Amy had to mature quite a bit. Yeah, she did. And then they met, and I feel like being, like, marrying later in life in Little Woman and in Persuasion, I think it just made their potential love deeper and stronger.
So much, yeah.
Like, who knows how well their marriage would have been if they got married before versus now. Totally. Because now they have the maturity, the capability, the money, honestly. Yeah. Just to be married and have the future that they want.
Totally. Oh, so good. So good. Anyways, Callie, I rambled for so long because I think it was just because I had quotes, and the quotes take time to kind of unpack. So, you girl, you go.
No, I don't apologize. Honestly, most of everything you said is what I wanted to talk about.
Oh, okay.
So it's perfect. No,
I
it's
want to know
perfect.
your thoughts then. Yeah.
So for me, okay, I have to preface saying this. If you go on my Goodreads account, you'll notice I only gave this book 3.5 stars. But, okay, no. I have to justify
Okay,
this.
good.
I have to justify this.
My problem is I'm like 0 or 5. So
See,
it's like.
This might just be a tangent, but that's just how my brain works.
Uh-huh.
I feel like this is just proves that reading and books are so subjective, even within your own self.
True.
Like when I finished this book, I was thinking about what rating to give it, and I was like, I loved this book so much. Like I really loved it. And then I was looking at everything else that I had given like 5 and 4 stars, and I was just kind of like, but like Pride and Prejudice, I think I gave 4 stars, and I'm like, it's not quite Pride and Prejudice level for me.
Yeah.
So it's just underneath that. So that's why I gave it that rating.
Got it.
Still loved it,
that makes sense.
Still recommend it to everybody.
Totally.
Y'all should read it. But it's like I kind of think of it in a couple years. I might not remember everything that happened, so I'll have to reread it. But I'm gonna remember what happens with Pride and Prejudice.
Yeah.
I also just know that story more.
Got it.
Anyways, but
got it.
that's just to preface my thoughts. But I still loved it. I loved the writing. I mean, it like normal. It took me like 10 pages to get used to what's going on. But one aspect that I really loved about this is the main thing I want to talk about, is I loved how it was, and this is like today's verbiage. It's a second chance romance.
Oh,
That's like
yes!
the trope that it's in.
Yes.
But the only other second chance romance book I've ever read was Love with Other Words.
Love with Other Words.
Love with Other Words is how it's called. Hold on. I have to look it up.
Love and Other Words.
Love and Other Words. And I really liked Love and Other Words. It's basically about this girl and this guy, and this girl is like super rich. Mm-hmm. So she has a summer home and then a different home where her school is at. And every summer she goes to this place, and her next door neighbor is this boy. And when they're teenagers, they become best friends because they both love to read together. And they eventually start dating, but this is massive spoilers for this book.
Okay.
But it has to do with my point.
Okay.
So I have to share it.
Well, good.
So, like halfway through the book, they've broken up because it bounces between present and past.
Okay.
But you eventually learn that he supposedly cheated on her.
Oh.
And so that's why they broke up.
Oh,
and that's
no.
why they weren't together. And so I feel like that's how a lot of second chance romance books are. Usually someone did something like super horrible, like cheating, or there's a massive miscommunication.
Yep.
Something that is like you have to do a lot of forgiveness for, or like you have to really, information has to be realized.
Yes.
Versus this one, I felt like I prefer how this one was. Like all it simply was is like right person, wrong time.
Yeah.
Like they met when they were young, they fell in love, but they just weren't mature enough to get married at that point.
Yeah.
So then 8 years later, there wasn't necessarily anything to forgive. Well, other than Anne having to forgive for rejecting him in the first place.
Yes. Yes.
But that's still, I feel like they both in the end realized that they were young. It's easier to forgive something like that.
Yeah.
Versus, oh, I thought you cheated on me for years.
Yeah.
Like, even though you did it, that's something I'm going to have to get over.
Yeah. Not saying those things happen and those things are real.
Yeah.
But I really do prefer this because it just it doesn't have to be some major tragedy.
Yeah. Plus, also, I just have the personality where I have a hard time giving people second chances as a person. If someone has done me wrong, I don't like to say I hold a grudge, but I don't forget it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to sit there and fester or be angry at
I'll
somebody.
be friendly, but you're not in my life anymore.
I'm never going to be friends again. Like, if it was Love and Other Words, I never would have gone back with him.
No.
Never. That was the one part of the book I didn't like, was that they did get back together. I didn't like that. I kind of wish they had become friends, realized that they're different people, but that there was just something... their relationship was damaged, and they have to move on with other people.
Oh, you know what? I think we need to read Count of Monte Cristo at some point. Because have you read that? Oh my gosh! Yeah! Okay, so that one is I can't spoil anything because that is a freaking good book. Okay, we will to be talked about. in
TBR.
further months down the road.
Yes.
But what
That's a
you're
massive book.
No, okay, but it's so good. You have to read it. It never is boring though. Like
Okay.
you're just like constantly like, dude, what is gonna happen?
Yeah.
This is freaking crazy. This is wild. Anyways, it's so good.
Yeah.
But what you said makes me feel like you would kind of.
Oh, I believe it. I believe it.
Continue. So you liked that Persuasion was like, it was more of a matter of like maturity and less a tragedy. Like someone done someone really wrong.
Yeah. Plus, I also felt like the love was real versus just attraction. Like they were just attracted to each other, so that's why they're together. Versus this one, I like believed in the love.
You know,
That's the other reason why I just love Jane Austen is I am convinced that they actually love each other versus like that guy's hot and I have sexual attraction to him.
no, it's so true.
And it's like later on they'll be like, oh, I love this about him. He has this great quality. But this one I was fully convinced that yes, they love each other.
I feel like there's such a like sensory writing around romance in contemporary writing because when I read, I'm like, I don't know what these people look like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I like they only talk about like a woman's like bloom.
Yeah.
Which is like I think Jane Austen kind of like being like, we don't even know what that freaking means. Like
It's said, but what does it mean?
like what do we even know? But it's like this youthfulness, happiness, whatever. That's all we get.
Yeah.
We have no idea how Wentworth looks or how he smells. Yeah. We have no idea.
Probably doesn't smell very good.
Or how they move.
Yeah.
Like, it's like, you literally, and like, I think they talk about how like sailors just look weathered and like the dad's vanity is like, oof, yeah, that's not my profession.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, yeah, because you're not out in the sun all day. That's why these men look so old.
Yeah.
But they're young. And so it's just like it's just realistic. And I think that's refreshing for me.
Yeah.
Because like, not that I don't eat up those books that like, are like Sarah J. Maas or Rebecca Yarros where like you have to get like every little detail of someone's eye color or like how they smell or like how they carry themselves. But Jane Austen can give you so much without any of that and I feel like I get more.
Because I feel like it's past just what their physical characteristics are and like who they are as people.
Like in the end, beauty is like subjective so it doesn't even matter.
Literally.
You know? Like Charlotte Bronte, I'm like, she did a good job doing that too.
She did. Well, her characters, I wouldn't say that always the best.
No, but it's funny because it's just like that's like another genre where it's like beauty is like a construct and it's and if you really love a person it shouldn't matter. Yeah. You know?
Who cares?
Yeah. Anyways.
But that was like the main takeaway I got from it is I just loved how I ended it and I was like, man, that was a love story. Like that was a story where two people came together and like found each other.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I was a little worried that I was going to get a little bored because I have a hard time finding enjoyment. Again, I feel like I have a lot of similar views as Charlotte Bronte. If it's just the mundane, I'm like, okay, you're a girl who is like in this beautiful place listening to your sister. Like, how is this interesting? Yeah. But I was so invested in the characters and what they thought and how they were going to progress.
That's awesome.
Matter.
Yeah, that's good.
Like I found enjoyment in the mundane and I wanted to know what the next thing Mary was going to complain about.
Oh, I know. Mary's so good.
Or I had to set the book down and just laugh at the scene where it's Mary's husband, what's his name? Charles. And they're walking somewhere. I don't even remember where they're walking to. And he's got Anne on one side and Mary on the other side. And you just learn that his family actually wanted him to marry Anne. And Mary on his right side probably is like complaining about something and he drops her arm. Continues to hold on to Anne's arm. And she's like so mad, grabs his arm, and then he eventually just drops both of their arms and then like runs off. Yeah. Like I thought that was so funny. But I don't know, like just adding that in really just, I think adding in the extremes like that just shows who Anne is a character. And then you're able to fully believe her development. And I don't know, I like the extreme contrasts. Yeah. That even though I think it's kind of ridiculous, it needs to be. Yeah. If it wasn't, the mundane would just be too mundane.
Yeah, it's so true. I love that. No, but look, those little quirks where I'm like, dang, that is hilarious. And also poor Anne. And like the beginning, I think that was so hard for me was because Anne would just be told what to do sometimes. Because like they'd be like, oh, Anne, you're tired. Let's take you on the carriage. And she's like, no, honestly, I would prefer to just walk by myself.
Yeah.
And they're like, no. And Captain Wentworth is like, puts her in the carriage.
Yep.
He's like, you need to go home. You got hurt. But it's just like, so that just goes back to like, she's easily persuaded, but she's just talking about like, there is, like, you can't be absolute in one or the other. Like, and so like, there can be a problem with you're constantly being persuaded by other people.
Yeah.
There also can be a problem when you're constantly firm, like Mary.
Yeah.
Mary is like, this is what we're doing. And everyone's like, wow.
Throw a fit if we don't do it.
Yeah, literally. And she's like, has such bad FOMO, like the whole book. And like, I love the fact where Anne is like, Wentworth never talked about Anne. Or because I think Bentwick, like, thought highly of Anne.
Yeah.
And Charles is like, he was speaking so well of you, like, the whole time. And she was like, and Mary was like, no, she didn't. Like, Mary can't handle attention anywhere from herself. And she literally, like, what says goes. And so I feel like that's, like, there's such stark characters because, like, she's always set.
Yeah.
And, like, Anne kind of has to be like, okay, well, I'm not going to throw a giant fit.
Yep.
So I'm just going to go in the carriage.
Or, like, that... Like, one of the first times you really meet Mary when she's talking about her kids, and it's like, my kids don't listen to me, so I send them away.
Yeah. And Charles spoils them. And, like, this house spoils them. And then she talks to the house, like, of the grandparents. Charles' parents are like, we have to feed these children. Like, we have to take care of them, or else they, like, do this. And so it's like, everyone's complaining, and it's, like, all around, like, Mary.
And then Anne... I love how she just kind of exists in it.
Yeah.
Like, she listens to her sister complain, and she doesn't ever really complain back.
No.
She just kind of is like...
She's nice to Mary.
Yeah, she's nice to Mary. Well, because she loves her. It's her sister.
It's her sister.
And I loved that aspect of it, too. Like,
Yeah.
this is an annoying younger sister.
Yeah. Literally. It was an
And
annoying
she's like,
younger
you know what?
sister. And
I love her.
No, it's so true. And also, like, it's funny, though, because in the book, the narrator points out, like, Charles probably would have been... Like, the sisters talk about this, too. They're like, Charles was a better person with Anne than he's with Mary. Like, he probably would be more useful. And, like, care more to be better. And, like, and how it's different with Mary. And I'm just like, oh, that's so sad. But, like, you still love Mary, even though she's crazy and ridiculous. But, like, you, like, see how much Anne, like, cares about her dad and her older sister Elizabeth, who don't care at all about her existence.
No.
Like, even though, like... You think the dad would because his wife was so similar to Anne. And, like, the wife was the reason they were financially stable their whole marriage. And then as soon as, like, she passed away, they were, like, in debt and had to lease their house out because they can't afford anything. Like, it was just sad to me because I'm like, that just goes to show, like, the way of thinking of the gentry because they just were wanting to marry so they could, like, socially climb. And so, like, for the mom, like, it was like what you were saying with Amy, where it was an economic proposition. And for Anne, I feel like she was able to take that into account while also being able to be like, I don't know if that's the life I necessarily want for my family. You know? Anyways, so great. I had all of it. All the social commentary.
True. I know. Well, that was the other part I loved was how Jane Austen was able to really address, like, the social issues and how Anne loved her family, but that's also kind of what was holding her back originally. When she originally said no. Yeah. And probably why she stayed at home for 8 more years and never married anybody else. She was held back by society and her family. Yeah. And even though her family didn't really care about her, she
cared about the image.
Yeah, the image. She had to mature enough to leave that and find who she is. Yeah. And be her own human being.
Yep. And I will say that really the whole Lyme trip is, like, split middle in the book.
Yeah, it is.
Like, it's like a turning point.
I think it's, like, starts volume 2, right?
Yeah, it starts volume 2. So it's, like, supposed to be this turning point in both her and later realize Wentworth's character, where she's, like, really becoming her own. And I like how they said it was like Anne's second spring. Yeah. and it wasn't like because, like, she has another shot about being beautiful. That was never the point. It was like the fact that she was able to find happiness again, and it was like on her own.
Yeah. See, that's what I love too, is it wasn't that she found happiness and she bloomed because she said yes to marrying Wentworth. It was like, no, she bloomed, became her own person, and then because of that, she could marry Wentworth.
Literally.
And then they could be individuals together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she didn't know how it was going to end up for her.
No.
She was like, this Mr. Elliot is kind of hanging around.
Mm-hmm.
Bentwick clearly likes to hang around me. But she's never like, she clearly is just loves Wentworth.
Yeah.
So she's probably not going to, she would have refused both of their proposals probably.
Probably.
But anyways, so good.
But yeah.
We love Persuasion.
That's been it.
Yeah. That's literally it. That's our spiel.
That's our spiel. Thank you for listening to our podcast, our TED Talk.
Yep.
But yeah, next time we're very excited.
Oh, yes.
We're going to be reading Lore Olympus. Are you going to grab it?
Yes!
I personally, I've only ever read one other graphic novel. So
Beautiful.
this is going to be our next one. And we just kind of want to explore. Lauren, I've never read it. Lauren has already read it and loves it.
Man, what don't I love? Honestly, on this podcast, I feel like man, maybe we just gotta find a book that I hate. Okay, that's a challenge.
That's a challenge.
Yeah.
I bet I could find one.
You probably could.
No, we gotta find one where I love and then you don't like.
Yes.
That's what we have to do. That's a challenge.
The problem is I don't like I love the books you tell me to read. That's the
I
problem.
don't know. We'll figure it out.
I don't know. We'll find a way. But Rachel Smith finished this series, I believe, last year. Mm-hmm. And we are so excited to share it because it's a different genre. It's something new.
Yeah.
That I don't usually read. And this was my introduction
I never
to
usually
it.
read graphic novels.
Yep.
Like I said, I've only ever read one.
Yeah. And so this is something new. So if you've never tried one, we'd invite you to
different
explore.
genre, different medium.
Yes.
There's pictures.
Yes. Shout out to Gavin, my brother-in-law, because he's the one that showed this book to me and it changed my life.
Is the same person who wrote the story to do the art?
She did the art originally, and then she had a team helping her with the art.
Oh,
like
okay.
she did the story and the art.
To the story and the art? Okay.
Yeah. And then like slowly it gets
It's
better.
free on Webtoons.
Yes.
But I think you can only, since it's completed, I think you can only read a couple a day. And
Yeah.
on Webtoons, they're episodes.
Yes.
So it's like, maybe like
chapters or
4,
episodes.
like
Yeah.
frames.
Mhm.
So they're super short, but she sells them in volumes that you
Yes.
can buy.
So I like the volumes because she adds in like things she couldn't fit into Webtoons. So they're kind of, and also just as incentive to buy her volumes.
Yeah.
Because like it's beautiful artwork.
I don't think they get paid artists get paid as much on Webtoons versus if you were to go buy it.
So she has like exclusive things she puts into the volumes, and I'm like slowly collecting them because I love this story so much. It's Greek mythology. There are going to be trigger warnings, but like with trauma, but she's really good about showing those.
Yeah.
And we'll make sure to talk about that, but we're super pumped.
Yeah. Pumped to new story, new genre. Like totally different, like Jane Austen. Oh yeah, it's hard to get into.
Yeah.
And then it's like graphic novel. There are pictures.
There's
You can see.
pictures, and they're like, it's literally so fast.
But even still, you can have like a deep, well-written story.
Literally. I totally agree with that. And let us know if there's any graphic novels you may know about that you want us to explore. Yeah, because I really think this was my gateway into graphic novels, but I haven't like explored as much as I think there could be. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that. But
Yeah.
anyways.
Thanks for tuning in and listening to us, and we will see you next month.
Bye.
Bye.